This video was brought to you by my fiery band of Patreon supporters. I'm talking about Conji97, Killer 0945, Isadante, and the biggest bro of them all, Hitman Bros. Thanks, bros. So, let's talk about dragons. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably summarize the elemental dragons as the fire one that makes you hit harder, the rock one that makes you tankier, the wind one that makes you go zoom, and then the ocean one which makes the map really pretty. But there is a lot more aspects to the dragons that are really important to master if you want to improve your game. There's a lot of stuff to unpack in this video, from buffs to map changes, strategies, souls, interactions, and more. And so I'm going to go through each dragon individually, starting off with the most vanilla dragon of them all, the Infernal Dragon. So I call the Infernal Dragon the most vanilla because he is the easiest and the least dangerous dragon to kill. He has an average attack damage, he has average attack speed, he's got no real unique features. Like, his attacks are AoE, but other than that, he's just a dude. He's just a fiery dude. The only particular thing that you need to watch out for is if the game starts out with an Infernal Dragon as the first one, because junglers are able to very easily solo this very early, and so it makes that early vision especially important. And just a quick note here, while I'm talking about vision, this applies to all the dragons, but this blast cone spawns between 5 minutes and 5 minutes 30. Which is exactly when a jungler should be finishing their first jungle item and be preparing for dragon. Now, when using this blast cone, the Rift Scuttle will not be able to detect someone doing Baron, and so you can abuse this to sneak dragons, or you can make sure that you have a ward vision inside the dragon pit to prevent this from happening to you. The Infernal Dragon buff is a 4% boost to AD and AP, which honestly, early game is pretty average, because 4% of nothing is still nothing. But this becomes amazing and possibly the absolute best dragon buff the longer the game goes on. That 4% is also multiplicative. Let's talk about the Infernal map, because as you know, the map is determined after the second dragon of the game is killed, and then it will terraform depending on if the third dragon is a wind, ocean, mountain, or infernal dragon. Now, for most dragons, this is the most interesting part because it changes the game so dramatically, but it's almost never talked about. The map changes can create new optimal warding spots, it can create new ways to make picks and change the way that you should approach objectives. Unless it's the Infernal Dragon map, in which case it literally just gets rid of these two walls and one bush. I'm telling you. Infernal Dragon's vanilla. The one cool thing that does change on the map is the amount of blast cones that spawn. Now, the theme of the Infernal Dragon is fighting, and the extra blast cones definitely give you that extra creative tool to use in fights. They spawn in the alcoves, which are pretty useless, but most importantly, they spawn here and here. You can use these to chase deep, navigate around the enemy vision to get some really cool ganks, or they can be used together in a chain to cover some crazy distances really quickly, which can be amazing to escape with. And even though in almost every other aspect of the Infernal Dragon being lame, honestly, its buff and its soul are some of the most powerful late game buffs that there is. An Infernal Soul causes your abilities to explode around the target, alright? But it deals 22.5% bonus AD, 13.5% of your bonus AP, and 2.5% of your bonus health to enemies. And if that wasn't enough, it's on a 3-second cooldown. This stacks up to be an insane amount of damage in a team fight, regardless of what your damage composition is. I think it is super underrated and something that you need to consider going into late game fights. If the enemy has an Infernal Soul, or if you have an Infernal Soul, it's pretty terrifying. And then next up, we have the Cloud Dragon. Now this is a dangerous dragon. Have you ever had that experience where you're pretty healthy, you're high level, and so you decide to do a quick solo dragon? Why not? And then randomly, out of nowhere, you look away from the screen for like 3 seconds, you glance back, and you've lost all your health and have been completely destroyed. Yeah, that was probably a Cloud Dragon. Dragon's damage doesn't come primarily from their base attack damage. It comes from an on-hit effect, which deals 7% of your current health as bonus physical damage. So think of it like they have a Blade of the Ruined King. This effect is treated as a spell, and so it can't be reduced by things that block or reduce attack damage. And this is why the Cloud Dragon is surprisingly strong. it has double the attack speed of the next fastest dragon, which means that this thing can take you down to 50% health in 8 seconds. And this makes the Cloud Dragon the most dangerous and the hardest dragon to kill throughout the game. But it's not actually as strong as it might seem, because it deals 7% of your current health. In the first 8 seconds you will go from 100% to 50%, but in the next 8 seconds you'll only go from 50% down to 30%. And so it gets you low very quickly, but then becomes a lot weaker. Now the way to abuse this is, again, to keep this space warded. Because what's going to happen is that junglers who try to take this dragon are often unexpectedly going to put themselves in very dangerous situations trying to kill this quickly, and it's going to leave themselves open for an easy kill. The Cloud Dragon buff provides ultimate cooldown reduction and can ignore the cooldown reduction cap, which is, I think it's a really cool creative buff, but it's not actually super noticeable in the game unless you get a couple of them stacked up. Now there are a few interesting interactions with this, like it stacks additively with Ultimate Hunter, which can provide some absolutely crazy ultimate cooldown reduction. And for champions like Shyvana, who gets the buff, because she doesn't really have an ultimate cooldown, for instance, it instead increases her Fury generation, and on people like Udyr, it just acts like regular cooldown reduction. The other cool interaction with Udyr is that the Cloud Soul, which gives you scaling move speed from 10 to 50% for 6 seconds after using your ultimate. Because Udyr is obviously so good, all of his abilities are classed as ultimate abilities, this actually activates the move speed every single time Udyr uses anything. And so Cloud Soul is fantastic on Udyr. But overall, the Cloud Soul, I think, is a nice to have. It's not the most game-changing soul to have in a team fight, but it can be great on certain champions. But I mean, with the amount of CC being thrown around, it can pretty much just be forgotten a lot of the time. And then we have the Cloud map. Now this changes two things. It spawns these speed zones in the center of every jungle quadrant, and it spawns extra Scryer blooms. Now these speed zones don't extend into all of the camps, because they're not a perfect circle, but it should be abused to split push and roam. As a mid laner or a split pusher, a cloud map is your dream situation, and if you're not constantly roaming using these zones, you're missing out on value. Now lastly is these new Scryer blooms. Now these are positioned in a way so that you can use them to clear any vision the enemy might have set up in your own jungle as you're leaving the base. The proper way you want to be using these is to save it until you're about to go and do an objective, and then you can clear out any fresh, deep vision the enemy might have set up beforehand. The other position of these new blooms is in the tri-bush near top and bot lane, and they can be used offensively by your laners to try and clear vision out for your jungler or mid to gank using the speed zones, or to scout and get a lock on the enemy jungler. Next we have the Mountain Dragon. Now this tanky boy is the weakest dragon for the reasons we spoke about earlier, and the fact that he only has a 0.25 attack speed. That's one attack every 4 seconds. The only catch to this is that he does take a while to kill, and so it does give the enemy a lot of time to react and come and contest. Now one of the interesting things about killing these dragons, by the way, is that the way that they scale. Dragon stats don't increase as the game goes on. Other than their health, the way that they scale is through their passive called Ancient Grudge. Basically, dragons become a lot tankier and deal more damage depending on how many dragons your team has slain that game. So you're going to deal 7% less damage, and you're going to take 20% more damage for every stack of dragon you have. Now this can make the Mountain Dragon particularly very tanky in the later games, and it makes it a lot easier for the enemy team to outburst you for the steal. And so remember that. When you do secure the Mountain Dragon buff, you're going to get a 6% boost in your armor and magic resist. Now, because of the way diminishing returns work with armor and magic resist, and the more you get, the less percent back you get, trust me, I've done the math, don't worry about it, this ends up being a really great defensive buff, even if you don't have much armor or magic resist to start with. And even just picking up a little bit makes this a lot more effective. But the greatest part about the Mountain Dragon is the Mountainous Rift. The few boulders that it adds to the map makes the game so much more dangerous and opens up so much fantastic opportunity to create creative kills. Now this is personally my favorite map because people underestimate just how much vision value the terrain has. For example, You can use these rocks to make unexpected picks in the enemy jungle. The enemy is so used to warding brushes that they will always put themselves in a dangerous spot trying to navigate around these rocks, where they don't realize that they are as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the brushes themselves. They're not going to realize how close you could be to them, and they will overextend into dangerous positions. You can also use these in fights to create really nice safety buffers around you, and for mobile champions, this map makes you just that much more powerful. I do think the biggest impact that the mountainous map has is when you've got big AoE comps, because you're able to funnel teams into these small spaces, and so people like Rumble, Fiddlesticks, anyone with a powerful AoE, you're so easily able to have those massive wombo combo team fights. And then last but not least, we have the Ocean Dragon, which is by far the funniest dragon to kill. If you're gonna straight up fight it, it's not that much different to the Infernal Dragon. However, it has an AoE slow, which is insanely effective. Now, people struggle with this dragon because they try and kite it around and just get mega slowed. In my opinion, the Ocean Dragon makes you the most vulnerable, because if an enemy comes along, it becomes almost impossible to take aggro off you and very, very hard to escape. But on the flip side, this is a great dragon to try and prevent escapes. Attacking the dragon and letting it attack your enemy becomes an insanely effective lockdown strategy, because it's very, very hard to shake. And while we're talking about contesting dragons real quick, this is a side note, but I just want to put it out there, that this is a small mistake I see a lot of people make. If your jungler has smite, do not save your burst for dragon. This is how 99% of dragons get stolen. You want to only burst the dragon down if your jungler does not have smite. If they do have it, bursting it is just going to mess up your jungler's timing, and it's going to get stolen. The Ocean Dragon probably has the best early game buff in the game, granting you 2.5% per stack of missing health regen every 5 seconds. That's literally like the healing effect from a red buff, all the time, for your whole team. During laning phase, this can be incredible for passive laners because it maintains that pressure and keeps you really topped up, and so it should be an absolute top priority if it's the first dragon of the game. Now, following on from its fantastic buff, it also has probably the best soul in the game, which makes you heal an insane amount of health and mana when you deal damage. Its numbers are similar to the Infernal Soul, but it has double the base recovery. Over the length of a team fight, this can easily add up to thousands of HP and mana recovered by your team, and is seriously a game-changing soul. And then lastly, we have the Ocean Map, which again, is an absolute massive change. This is why I think the Ocean Dragon is probably the most impactful dragon. The first change is the brushes, which, consistent with our other dragons, mainly impacts the Dragon Pit and the areas around blue and red buff. This change expands the bushes and connects them to different walls, and much like the mountain map, makes the whole jungle just super scary because it takes away a lot of your champion vision. You have to face check a lot of brushes, and you can be in your own jungle but not be able to see very much, and it makes wards super important. The other thing these brushes allow you to do is perform some great jukes. When escaping an enemy, for example, if you're able to walk into a bush, you can then move to the side. Rather than straight through, continuing where you were going to walk, they might shoot a skill shot at you which you'll miss. Now with a regular brush, they'd be able to see you step to the side, so you can't do that. But in these new brushes, you can easily move laterally, and you can do some really cool Houdini tricks with this and just confuse the enemy. The other change that happens on the Ocean map I want to talk about is the honey fruit. Now there are two ways that you should be using these that I never see people do. Now one is during the laning phase. Just please, pop out into the jungle, chow down, eat some honey fruit. They restore a ton of health and mana. If you've just had a skirmish, you've used your pots, you're a little bit half health, a little bit on the lower side, you can go pick up some honey fruit and completely equalize the lane again. And then the second way is to use them as a means to slow your enemies. The fruit here can block the entire path with a pretty powerful slow. You could think of it like a Zig's minefield. You can use it to slow an enemy from escaping, or you can pop them behind you to close off the paths and create that extra distance. I see people fail to use these in jungle skirmishes all the time when it can make the absolute most important difference. And that is everything that you need to know about the elemental dragons. I know it was a big one. I hope you enjoyed and I hope you learned something. I think, if anything, you don't take anything else away from this video. Just remember that dragons are an important element of the game, and you should always be aware of where they are, what they are, and who has which stacks. But they are simply just a way to help cover your weaknesses or reinforce your strengths. You shouldn't throw a game trying to secure just one dragon. Dragons are an excuse to force fights, to create picks, to build excitement, or help you control the flow of the game. And a lot of the time, that is more important than the actual buff itself. Now, if you'd like to see a deep dive or strategy video on a specific topic in the future, be sure to drop a comment below. Give me some ideas, and go check out some of my other League videos. I've done one on vision score and how it actually works, and then how to get an S in every single game. I hope you like this video, and until next time, Ark out. There's a helicopter. Or a plane. Or something. And so we Malibu. Now when using this cone, the rift... I shouldn't call it a cone. For the Ark Army secret word of the day, helicopter. Helicopter.